any one of you who is not recommending marijuana in your practice is also not engaged in the legitimate practice of medicine. Because the evidence is too overwhelming in this area. The evidence is too overwhelming. You know, you can't look at all of the evidence emerging from around the world about the medicinal benefits of the cannabinoids and of marijuana and not be thoroughly aware and knowledgeable and recommending that to people as an option. And when the drug czar Krolakowski, who's going to be the best drug czar we've ever had, that ain't saying a lot, right? When he says, well, yeah, I now acknowledge that marijuana is medical because the president did say it during the campaign, right? But not smoke marijuana. Well, that's not true. I sort of a letter last week saying, you know, dear drug czar, that's not true. You know, let's have a drug czar now who no longer utters the big lies. Let's have a drug czar who no longer utters the big lies, right? And the fact of the matter is that taking marijuana in as a medicine in a smoke form may be unconventional, may be unusual, but there are things in medicine like risk-benefit ratio. What's the real harms of taking this form? What about the vaporizer option? But even aside from the vaporizer option, why isn't it legitimate? When smoking it helps you titrate your dose, control the amount, you get rapid onset of effect. When they say smoke marijuana is just like Latril, that magical cancer drug that turned out to be nothing, hey, there's a rapid response effect. We know this stuff works. So I'm pushing them to do that. And they're going, but what about those fly-by-night characters who are writing 100 prescriptions like that, right? You know? And I say, look, I understand, but that's the other part. And I don't have easy answers for that. What's going on here or California, whatever, about people who just say, you know why marijuana is medical? Because if my giving you this ID keeps you from being arrested and going to jail, that's a medical benefit. When people start saying, well, they're giving marijuana for everything, you say you're anxious, you say you're this, you say you're that, and the fact of the matter is, doctors are giving prescription drugs for everything. I mean, quite frankly, you turn on the damn TV set, you can't go for an hour without some commercial going, do you feel anxious? Do you feel worried? Do you feel nervous? Do you feel shocked? Do you feel anything at all? Because we have a drug for you, right? I mean, that's our society, and the notion of holding marijuana to a different standard only for the terminally ill, only for the really serious ill. Well, that doesn't make any sense either. So, the whole way in which this thing is opening up, and the way in which people are making money, and all this sort of stuff, I see this. There are people who say to me, the whole decriminalization, this whole medical, it's just, we should just legalize the stuff. And what I say to them is, there is no just legalizing stuff. There is no 18th Amendment, effectively, of marijuana prohibition that we're just going to repeal like that. Right? That in America, change by incremental change is the way it's been, and it's the way it's going to be. And if that means that we get into this messy middle, this messy gray area, where medical marijuana is being used legitimately, quasi-legitimately, not really legitimately, where we get this messy middle, where marijuana is being decriminalized and possession is being decriminalized, but the wholesale and the other side is being, that's the way it's got to be. And we have to maneuver our way through this. We have to maneuver our way through this. I'm actually curious, quite frankly, because, with so many people now involved in caregiving and growing, what have you, I'm not sure how everybody feels about legalization of marijuana. I mean, I got to tell you, I was, last year I went up in a small four-seater plane with 3 growers. And we waved to the DEA helicopter as we took off. And then they drove me around, and I was blown away by what I saw. I mean, once you learn to live, you see there's like green pods. They're always in couples, 2, 4, 8, 12, 20, 16, 24. I mean, everywhere, I mean, mostly in the rural areas, but then you get to the northernmost town, it's like in the backyard. And if you can't see a pod, you see a tarp. And then you see there's a greenhouse up in the hills with no roads. There are barns, right? There's no horses or cows in it. Right? So I mean, it's everywhere, right? And I said, well, what's going on here? And they said, well, quite frankly, the cops, if you get too big, they'll go after you. If the neighbors complain, they'll go after you. And if you piss them off, they'll go after you. But they just don't have the resources to go after everybody. So some people are going to be gone after. And there's all the issues. Now what happens? The people who own the vineyards are pissed off because the growers are paying $20 an hour for people doing the cutting, and they're only paying 10 or 12. the cops are pissed off because they're making $60 grand a year, and the growers' kids are getting nicer Christmas presents. I mean, it's a union community dynamic. And meanwhile, the people running, all the garden stores, I mean, some of them are like, they don't know what to do. It's like, evangelical Christians who get 90% of their business from the marijuana business. I mean, it's a difficult issue. But in the plain, two of the growers are saying, well, I don't know how I feel about legalizing. Because, I mean, you legalize it, it's just going to be the Budweiser or Philip Morris of marijuana, and, I'm making my $100, $125 a year, I got a good life with my kids, I work hard, but not that hard, there's some risk associated, so, can't we just, keep prohibition in place, but just stop enforcing it? And then another guy is going, no, man, we have to legalize this stuff. And he's saying, first of all, it's a matter of principle. The stuff that this weed, this marijuana, this medicine, this thing should be a crime, it's just not right. It's just not right. And secondly, quite frankly, we've developed a lot of expertise over the last 20 or 30 years. And we envision Mendocino and Humboldt becoming like the Napa and Sonoma Valley of marijuana. Right? And I've heard my friend Paul Chang in Jamaica, who does the legal idea, he's saying the same thing, right? So, and I have to say, I'm a little ambivalent, because one of the upsides, the silver linings of marijuana prohibition, the downside is, over 800,000 people got arrested last year for marijuana possession in a small amount. That's fucked up. 50% of all drug arrests are for marijuana in this country. It means that at any one night, 50 to 100,000 people are sitting behind bars in a local jail or a state or federal prison because they got caught with a joint, they were growing, whatever it might be. It means that people are getting killed. People are getting killed because people are protecting their grow, they're doing what, and because also, the famous Nobel Prize-winning economist Thomas Shelley wrote an article, he said, what is the business of organized crime? The business of organized crime is extortion from unorganized criminals. Well, unorganized criminals oftentimes means the hundreds of thousands of marijuana growers around America. And it means that as this thing goes on, the gangsters are going to come in. And they're going to start brutalizing and hurting a lot of people. I had a Dutch prosecutor come and visit me. He said, I'm totally with you, we should legalize. But you know why I say this? With the coffee shops in the Netherlands, most of them are supplied, he told me, I'm not certain this is true, this is what he told me, are supplied by kind of mom and pop small grows. But he goes, there's a growing export business, and that's being controlled by larger growers, and they're being targeted now by gangsters. Russian gangsters, Southern European gangsters, Dutch gangsters, who are killing people, or strong-arming them. So that's, I was in Christiania, the kind of marijuana open area in Copenhagen, Denmark. It was kind of a squatter city that kind of built up, and marijuana is sold openly there. And I was there a couple of weeks ago, and people said to me, look, this is great, we've created a special society. But we can't deny the fact that the Hells Angels and the Bandidos are controlling the large-scale distribution, the wholesale piece of this. So one problem with prohibition down the road is that things can stay sweet for a while, but at some point it gets ugly, right? My own preference, I also tell you this, I have met with people in Jamaica, I've met with the Maori in New Zealand, which are sort of more like African Americans here than like the Aboriginals in Australia, sort of part of the mainstream society, but more impoverished and dislocated in a way. And they will say, look, I would support legalization if you can guarantee that our people will still get their piece of it. Because we don't want the Philip Morrises and the Anheuser-Busch's taking this thing over. My model, and my libertarian allies get pissed at me when I say this, I would love to see the whole marijuana thing become legal and somehow become like the microbrewery model or the high-end cigar model. But I also know we do live in America. And we are a dynamic capitalist society, and we know that what's going to happen is that when it becomes legal, the big guys are going to come in with all their sophisticated needs. They will buy up some of the smartest talent now working in the illegal marijuana stuff. They'll buy up that talent. They'll start doing it. So it's not always a pretty picture. The question is, what price are we willing to pay?